Hello friends, welcome to the channel IT Simplified. In today's video, I'm here to discuss architecture and deployment steps for Veeam backup for Microsoft Azure version 4. So let's get started. Like always, if you're liking these sessions, don't forget to like, subscribe and share this content. So let's start by answering what Veeam backup for Microsoft Azure is. First of all, it's a standalone product which can be used for protecting your Azure workloads. It can be a Azure virtual machine, both Windows as well as Linux, Azure SQL database as a service, and now with the version 4 release, it also protects Azure file storage, which is a platform as a service and supports both NFS as well as SMB protocol. And the good thing is that even if you have Active Directory or both Azure Active Directory domain services, it fully integrates with it. And with this release of Veeam backup for Microsoft Azure, you can also confidently protect this workload. Now let's shift gear and discuss what is the architecture and the components involved when it comes to deployment. There are three components. You have backup appliance, backup repository, and worker instance. Let's start with the backup appliance. It's an Ubuntu machine. Here, you're going to store your configuration database, configure the policy, and this is what is responsible for giving instruction to the worker instance. Then you have the backup repository, which is typically an Azure blob storage and the container underneath. And finally, you have worker instance. This is the data mover. As you get instruction from the backup appliance, this is the instance which is responsible for moving the data and storing that under the backup repository. So with this, let me just flip over to the Azure portal and show you the configuration steps. Alright, so I'm logged into the Azure portal with admin credential. From the global search bar, let's search for Veeam. And in this case, we have to look for Veeam backup for Microsoft Azure. So I'm going to pick that. Now this is the marketplace gallery. And as I mentioned that we are in the version 4, the previous release was version 3, but for this deployment, I'm going to use version 4. Now, just want to point out, even if you have VBR already in your environment, you also get a plugin where you can add this instance and give you the one place where you can manage all these things from. But for this demonstration, let's concentrate on Veeam backup for Microsoft Azure. Like any other instance or appliance, we need to specify the subscription we want to deploy. Anything or any deployment within Azure requires a resource group. This is a logical, basically, container in which you're going to store all your resources or different components for this appliance. I'm going to pick VRG. Then you need to give the name for this appliance and the region. Now you can deploy this with availability zone, give you better redundancy, and this is the image we're going to use, which is basically the marketplace image of Veeam backup for Microsoft Azure. You can always change different size, but I'm going to leave everything to the default. Authentication type, you can use the SSH public key or the password. I'm going to use the password in this case. For the disk, you have the option of choosing between premium or standard. I'm going to use the default. And under the networking, you can pick under which virtual network and subnet you want to deploy this. I'm going to use the VRG VNet and the default subnet. And just take all the defaults here. If you want, you can tag it. And you just need to review and create. Now, for the sake of this video, I've already pre-deployed this, which I'm going to show you in a moment. But other thing I want to show you is you'll be also needing a storage account. So let's go and search for it. And creating a storage account is also straightforward. You're going to search for it, and let's go and click on create. Pick the resource group under which you want to deploy this. Give a name for the storage account. You also need to pick the region where you want to deploy this. In my case, I'm going to use Canada Central for all my deployment. You can pick the region right from the drop down. You can pick redundancy of storage account. I'm going to again use all the default, but one thing I want to show you, because otherwise you're going to get error when you're trying to configure that from the management console of Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure, and that is under the data protection. Make sure that you disable the soft delete for blobs, otherwise you're going to get the error message. And rest of all of them going to be the default, and you just need to review and create. And again, for this video, I've already configured storage accounts. So this is the one we're going to use, my storage 1089. So if I go and show you this, I already have a container with the name C10. And in this container, I've already configured, but I'm going to show you that on the management console, but that is already in place. And if I go to the overview, I've already disabled the soft delete, as I said that otherwise you're going to get the default. You can see the blob soft delete I've specifically disabled. And for the appliance, let me go to the virtual machines. And this is the machine that I've deployed over here with the name VE. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab the public IP. And as I said that this is a Linux machine, Ubuntu flavor. So I'm going to grab the public IP and open a new tab with HTTPS. Paste this public IP. And this is the management console. But for the first time when you're trying to log in, let me just go to the configuration tab and go to the support information. And this is the version 4. This is the latest release from Veeam. Going back to the configuration, you will get a getting started page in which you have to configure the accounts, repository, and workers. And these are basically the accounts that you need to manage your Azure workload. In my case, I've already configured Girish. If you want, you can go and click on add and go through these motions. You can also configure the repository. This is the backup repository basically that you're going to use to store your image level backup. You can go and click on add button and give the name. You can use the account which can be used for storing these image level backup. I already have one created. And I have different storage account. For this demonstration, I'm using my storage 1089. And in this, I already have a container with the name C10, which I showed you. And then you also need to specify under which folder that you want to store the file. I'm going to use my file, but I'm going to come out of this. And the last thing that you need to configure is the worker. As I said that these are the data movers. These are the ones which are responsible for moving the data as they get instruction from the backup appliance. And configuring the worker node is also very straightforward. You need to specify the region. I'm going to use Canada Central. Under which network you want to deploy this worker node. And the subnet associated with this. And the network security group that you want to use for this deployment, right? And just go through this. And that is how you're going to, but again, as I said that, I just wanted to show you the configuration steps over here. And other thing I want to show you is this is your overview button. As I showed you, you can also configure the policy. As I mentioned with the version 4 release, you can also protect your Azure files. You already have virtual machine for which you can configure the policy. You can name it, say for example, P1, right? You can select your Azure Active Directory account. If you already have, in my case, I've already configured. Pick the region under which you want to protect your machine. So in my case, I'm going to use Canada Central. If you have multiple regions, you can also add that too. And this gives you a nice way of picking the resources. If you want to protect all the resources, you can just go and select all resources. If you want only specific virtual machines, say for example, or a resource group under which your machines are, you can do that too. Or machines with specific tags, you can also specify over here, right? You can browse if you want any specific machines that you want to select, or you want to select all of them. I'm going to pick just accounting machine here and click on apply. And again, just go through the motions over here. And this is how you're going to create the policy. And it is no different if you want to protect maybe your Azure files. It's going to be the same process. I'm going to click on Add button. Go to Next. Configure the account that's going to be used for this protection. And again, you have to pick the region. And select resources to protect. Now, when you pick Canada Central, say for example, it should populate all the storage account that or Azure file storage account that you have, which you want to protect. Now, in my case, I don't have any file storage, but if you have, you can just pick from here and put that under the policy, how often you want to protect it. I'm just going to come out of this. But this is your management console from where you're going to manage and protect your Azure workloads. Now, this was a brief overview of Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure version 4. Hopefully you liked it.